Your phone knows what time you go to sleep. It knows what you watch when you're sad. It knows what you click when you're lonely, when you're bored, when you're avoiding something important. And somewhere in a building you will never visit, there is a plan for your attention. Not your success, not your growth, your attention. And the terrifying part is this: that plan is working better than the one you have for your own life. Sit with that for a second. Somebody somewhere has mapped out your next 2 hours more precisely than you have mapped out your next 2 years. That's not an accusation. It's a mirror. And most people will look away from it in about 4 seconds because mirrors like this are uncomfortable. But you're still here, which means some part of you already suspects this is true. Let me tell you about a man I'll call David because his story is not unique. It is, in fact, the story of millions of people living right now, in this exact year, scrolling through something while their actual life waits quietly in another room. David was 26, sharp mind, real potential. He used to write poetry, short stories, the beginnings of a novel he never finished. He told himself he was just taking a break from it. That break lasted 4 years. Not because he lacked talent, not because life got in the way, but because every single night, when he had 90 free minutes that could have built something, he picked up a device that had been engineered by teams of psychologists and behavioral scientists to make those 90 minutes disappear without him noticing. He wasn't lazy. That's the part people get wrong. Laziness is doing nothing. This was different. This was doing something, just not the thing that mattered. And here's what most people miss about this. The modern world didn't remove discipline from your life. It made the absence of discipline feel like entertainment. That's far more dangerous. A man who does nothing feels bored, and boredom eventually pushes him to act. But a man who is constantly stimulated never feels bored long enough to ask the only question that matters. What am I actually building with my one life? Jim Rohn used to say that we must all suffer one of two things: the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. Discipline weighs ounces. Regret weighs tons. He said that decades before a single smartphone existed. But he was describing exactly this moment because he understood something timeless about human nature, that we will always trade what we want most for what we want right now, unless we are deliberately trained not to. And that's the real story of the device in your pocket. It is not evil. It is simply optimized. It is optimized for engagement, not for your becoming. It does not care if you become the version of yourself you were capable of being. It only cares that you stay. But here's where everything changes. Once you see this clearly, you can never fully unsee it. Think about what you actually look at every single day, more than almost anything else in your environment, more than the sky, more than your own family's faces, more than your goals written down somewhere you've forgotten about. A small glowing rectangle. And in that rectangle is an algorithm that has studied your weaknesses with more patience and precision than anyone who has ever claimed to love you. It knows you scroll when you're anxious. It knows you reach for it the second silence appears. It knows that an empty, unstructured moment in your day is dangerous to its business model, so it makes sure those moments rarely arrive. Silence is where reflection happens. Reflection is where change begins. So the system, without malice, without a single human decision made about you personally, simply removes the silence. And without silence, a person can live an entire decade and barely notice it left. This is the part that should genuinely disturb you, not the time lost yesterday. That's recoverable. It's the shape of a life when this pattern repeats for years uninterrupted. Ask yourself honestly, if the last 12 months had been condensed into a highlight reel, how many minutes of it would be moments that genuinely moved your life forward? Not moments that felt good. Moments that mattered 5 years from now. For most people, that number is smaller than they want to admit. Jim Rohn talked about the slow drift, how a ship that's off course by just 1 degree doesn't crash immediately. It simply ends up somewhere completely different than intended years later. And the person at the wheel never even noticed the turn. Nobody decides to waste their 20s. Nobody decides to let their potential quietly expire. It happens one unconscious scroll at a time, 1 degree at a time, until the destination looks nothing like the dream. That is the real danger of the plan your phone has for you. Not that it's evil, but that it's invisible. And invisible forces are the ones that shape us most, precisely because we never resist what we cannot see. So what do you do with this? You don't need to destroy the device. You don't need to disappear into the woods and become a monk. That's not realistic, and frankly, it's not necessary. What you need is far simpler and far harder. You need to become the author of your own attention again. Because attention is not just a resource. It is the resource. Everything you've ever built, every skill, every relationship, every business, every body you respect, every piece of art that moved someone, all of it was built one unit of attention at a time. Whoever controls your attention controls the direction of your entire life. Right now, you are renting that control out for free to companies that have run the math and concluded your unconscious habits are worth more to them than your conscious choices. David, the man I told you about, eventually changed, not through some dramatic moment, but through one small, almost boring decision. He started putting his phone in another room for the first hour after waking up. That's it. No app, no system, no extreme willpower challenge. Just 60 minutes of his day that belonged entirely to him again. In that hour, he started writing again, just badly at first, just a few sentences. But those sentences, repeated daily, eventually became chapters. The chapters became a manuscript, not because he found some burst of motivation, but because he reclaimed 60 uninterrupted minutes from a system that was never going to give them back voluntarily. This is the quiet truth at the center of everything. Discipline isn't about resisting temptation in the moment of temptation. That's almost always too late. Discipline is about designing your environment before temptation has the chance to speak. You don't win the war on the battlefield where the algorithm is strongest. You win it by choosing in advance where the battlefield will be. And here's the part that should stay with you long after this video ends. The algorithm is patient. It has years. It doesn't need you to fail today. It just needs you to fail by default repeatedly for long enough that an entire decade passes without your permission. Your job, the only real job you have in this, is to be more deliberate about your minutes than it is. Not louder, not more dramatic, just more deliberate. Because somewhere out there, right now, there is a version of you that finished the book, built the business, repaired the relationship, became genuinely strong, genuinely calm, genuinely whole. That version of you isn't a fantasy. He's not gone. He's just been waiting behind every notification you chose not to open, every scroll you chose to put down, every silence you let yourself sit inside instead of escaping. Your phone has a plan for you. It always will. The only real question, the one Jim Rohn would have asked you directly without softening it, is whether you have a plan of your own, strong enough, clear enough, written down somewhere real to compete with it. Because if you don't, the algorithm isn't going to apologize when your life is over and so much of it turns out to have happened on a screen. It was never trying to take your time. You handed it over, one unnoticed minute at a time. And the only person who can take it back is the one reading these words right now.